Hello and welcome to the Career Success Podcast. I'm Jason Connolly. If you're a regular listener to the show, it's great to have you back. But if you're a new listener, welcome to the show. In this insightful and thought-provoking series, we speak to business leaders and people who've had high levels of career success. But we also talk to up-and-coming and emerging business talent. We speak to such a variety of people all across the globe. We talk about success habits and what they do in order to ensure they stay at the top of their game. Listen and find out hints and tips to help you in the world of business. How do you set up your own company and make sure it's a success? But we also talk about business growth and how to get your company noticed. Practical advice to help you in your career from those who have made it to the top. In this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Trey Kauffman. Trey is from Ohio in the USA. He's an entrepreneur, owner of a highly successful website design and marketing agency. He's also a podcaster and an advocate for demanding better for ourselves. His goal is to empower others to look inward and find the happiness that they deserve. His spiritual awakening occurred after realizing others don't hold the key to his happiness. And through ridding himself of corporate toxicity, he was able to build a business and life he can reflect on daily with extreme gratitude. Trey, thanks for joining me on the show.
Jason, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to do this.
I am too. So we've had a really interesting conversation last week ahead of this podcast. But tell us a bit about the corporate toxicity and your background before you got to this place of having this realization. Tell us a bit about you.
Absolutely. Well, I know that's very much an eye-opening topic, and I think it's something that a lot of people experience in their professional work lives. Myself, as a bit of background, in college, I bounced around a lot. I think I had 4 or 5 majors before I finally graduated with a communications degree, which it's not nothing, but it's not much of something either. And so, naturally, when I fell out of college and stumbled my way into the professional world, I looked for the lowest hanging fruit, and I ended up with a bunch of sales type jobs. I got lucky with a couple small businesses, which I really enjoyed my time there. But a lot of times it's, we're going to churn you in, churn you out, and if you're not hitting your numbers, if you're not making the number of calls that we require of you, then you're out the door, which is not a great way to breed psychological safety within the work environment. I just learned that term rather recently from a guest on my podcast, and it's something that I think is so important that we need to emphasize within a work environment, making sure that people are not only happy, but they feel welcomed within that team environment, so they can in turn, provide the best results as they possibly can for the company. And so I never really had that. I didn't graduate with a degree in rocket science. I'm not working for SpaceX as much as I would love to. I found myself trying to make money so I could, live a life that I thought I wanted. And it wasn't until relatively recently that life that I thought I wanted, it wasn't it. And so I was able to shift gears a bit.
What was the life that you felt you wanted at the time?
I thought that I wanted to be able to afford enough or make enough money to go out after work, drink as much as I possibly can, go home, play video games, and just live a life of leisure, of hedonism, if you want to call it that. And I think, and I say this, I guess, kind of tongue in cheek. I think ambition was my problem. I had the ambition to want and dream the things that a big successful business owner or a podcaster or a writer would dream for, but I just didn't have the drive to go out and do them. So my ambition held me back from living that quote unquote life that I wanted, always going out to happy hours or always playing video games. But at the same time, I just didn't have the drive at the time to actually do the work to pursue them.
And why do you think that was? Do you think it's because there was an underlying kind of resentment that you was living in this kind of fear of constant being booted out of the company, so to speak? Because a sales environment in any company isn't easy, let alone if the underlying culture of the company itself isn't a nice one.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I I I probably realized this in retrospect when you actually work hard for the things that you want to accomplish, when you are willing to say no to, just in my particular, circumstance, no to alcohol, no to happy hours, no to, a random road trip, you
Mm.
are essentially segregating yourself from your core group of friends or coworkers or whatever you want to call it. You are making yourself different. And I don't think at the time I was willing to put myself or take myself out of the fold because I wanted to be included. I very much had a fear of missing out back in those days, where if somebody was out having fun and I was at home trying
Mm.
to work on a book or work on a podcast, I had that anxiety that I wanted to know what was happening in the lives of others. And FOMO it's a very real thing, and I know we get pegged as I'm not sure how old you are, Jason, but my generation.
33.
Say that again. 33.
33, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we as millennials, we get pegged with this idea that we've got this made up, anxiety disorder called FOMO, when it is a very real thing. At least that's what I've experienced. And it can be debilitating in, accomplishing your bigger and better goals.
Do you think social media is to blame for that?
I think it's a big problem. I I think that we want people to see us in the best possible light, and until you
Mm.
realize that people don't care about you, they care about themselves. And so if you think that people are going out of their way to make you feel bad or to make you want the life you have, you're mistaken. Nobody's thinking about you, they're thinking about themselves. And when we do our absolute best to only put our, the good elements of our lives out there, we are damaging the psyches of everybody who's seeing that. Because believe it or not, there's no such thing as an overnight success. Somebody is not getting $1 billion funding round just out of the blue. They are putting in years of hard work to build their
Mm.
companies. And finally, TechCrunch picked up this brand new startup that just
Mm.
appeared overnight. And now there's the massive Silicon Valley company. That's just not how it works. And if we think that's how it works, then we are going to have that anxiety in thinking that, others are living this incredible lives while I am here doing work that ultimately may not even matter.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's, from people from the outside looking in, people do think, well, it's okay being at the top. It's really, the people are really fortunate, or it's great if I'm earning loads of money, but to off the nice handbags, the nice holidays. Yes, okay, that's all well and good, but it doesn't a pot of gold at the end and a big smile and happiness necessarily.
Right.
So you was working, in these sales companies, in kind of corporate companies. And then you, in your profile here, you had a spiritual awakening after realizing others don't hold the key to your happiness. So tell us more about that, because that's quite interesting. That's what paves the way into what you're doing now.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest. I didn't know that term prior to, I don't know, maybe 6 months
Spiritual
ago.
awakening.
Yeah, I had a
Right.
I had a guest on the podcast who whose focus is, he's actually a filmmaker, and
Uh-huh.
he actually produces films based on people's spiritual awakenings. Like, oh, ask me a year ago what I thought that was. I thought it would have been, something that's woo woo type thing. And I didn't really realize what that meant for myself. And
What was the spiritual awakening to you? Because I'm interested in that.
yeah, that's the spiritual awakening for me was realizing that no, like you said in the copy, it was realizing that
Yeah.
nobody else held the key to my happiness except for myself, and that is extended to, I don't need a fancy house or a fancy car to be happy. Those things can add value to my life, but until I am completely content and happy with who I am and what I have and wanting what I have, then nothing is going to impact my level of happiness. And once I was able to realize that, once I was able to know that I am in complete control of myself and nothing else in this world, that's when I was able to start realizing that contentment and that happiness live inside of me. And that's been over a 4 or 5 year period.
Right. Okay. And then you went on to build your business, but was that kind of driven by a desire to kind of take your life into your own hands, your destiny into your own hands, or was that more in a pursuit of happiness, or was it a combination of all three and more?
I think it was a combination of all three and more. I mean, it was a very gradual series of events. I always knew that I wanted to work for myself, but like I said, in my 20s, I was so concerned with going out and having fun. I just the work that I had to do to actually get to a point where I was capable of, saying I'm my own boss. I was not willing to do it. It was a simple equation. I need to put in this much work. Here's the work I'm putting in, and they're not computing. And so finally, if I credit any book with changing my life, it's Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. That book, when reading it, I realized how in the way of myself I was getting. And when I was able to understand the role that ego played in my life, and not to hit it over the head with a shovel and bury it 6 feet in the ground, but to learn how to work with it and actually use it to my advantage, as opposed to me thinking I know every damn thing in the world. At that point in time, I was really able to say, okay, here's what I actually need to do to get to a point where I'm able to make my own living. And a lot of that was just doing research, understanding that, when it comes to certain things with setting up your LLC or, having your taxes done, there are people there who are willing and able and actually want to help you with that. And so when I understood that I didn't have to do all of this on my own, that was just the first domino to fall. And then I was really able to start putting a game plan in place.
It sounds to me that you're kind of, when you describe your 20s, it sounds like when you sort of describe how you was, that you weren't ready for this, or you weren't in the right place to give that level of work. It sounds to me that those years in your 20s though were kind of you almost saying, no, this isn't what I want, and you had to go through that experience to arrive at that place, to when you had that drive and get up and go. And maybe it was seeing those things in your 20s that kind of paved the way to you being a success, because you obviously went through a kind of journey there in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I've come into the habit of demonizing my 20s, and I don't want to do that. There's nothing about my 20s that I regret. There were no mistakes that, couldn't be undone. So I'm very thankful for that, because I did a lot of stupid crap. But I mean, I am thankful that I was able to have that fun and that level of carefree life that I was able to have back then. And I guess I got to a point where, yes, to your point, I was starting to say, okay, here's what I actually want. Here are the things that I thought were just going to happen overnight. I'm pushing 30, and none of them's happened. None of these things have happened yet. So maybe, just maybe, I actually need to start doing work. To your point earlier, I was raised from the end of high school through college on Facebook and then Twitter and then this social media, making it seem like these things just happened overnight. And when I finally realized that wasn't the case, that's when I decided to put my head down and just push forward.
Was it because you felt that actually it was that easy and it just wasn't happening to you, an opportunity wasn't arriving on your doorstep, and then
Yeah.
you suddenly have that moment of awakening and thinking, hang on a minute, these years are passing me by and I need to do something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah, that is
So
100% the case.
So today you're running a successful website design agency, a marketing agency. Tell us more about that. How did that kind of manifest itself, and how have you gone out there and marketed this business and brought money through the door, which is challenging for any business in its first year.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give credit where credit's due. So my last real job, I was actually with a dental office. It was a small dental office, but the budget was big enough to afford a marketing director, and so I was with them for a couple of years. And while there, they were a member of a networking organization. It's called Am Spirit, and so
Hmm.
I would network week in and week out, and it was a very close knit group of individuals, and I all the time credit these individuals with giving me the confidence and the resources to go out on my own. And so my business has become successful because of the relationships that I've built. And I can't overstate the fact that, in the last year, or how much in the last year podcasting and connecting with individuals across the world has done for me. Building solid relationships, building this foundational approach to working with people and providing value into their lives, so in turn they provide value into mine, has just been, I
Yeah,
can't overstate it. It's been so incredible. And so
yeah,
I was able to be profitable right out the gate because I was able to build a client base prior to leaving my real job and really start to build those relationships that got me to a place where I was comfortable going out of my way to talk with new and exciting and interesting business owners around not only Columbus, not only Ohio, but the United States and the world as well.
So it was podcasts that done a lot of that for you prior to launching.
Podcasting
Right.
did a fair amount, and just not having the inhibition preventing me from actually connecting with people.
Really, I totally agree with you. I think I've met more interesting people since I've started this podcast than I probably have in the last decade combined. But I think for me, it's been about when you kind of rise the career ladder and you open a business and you go through those absolute sheer struggles, and
Yeah.
oh my God, they have been absolutely immense since I've started mine. I found myself and sort of stepping back after a few years and going, hang on a minute, where are all my friends gone? Where are they? And I actually had a moment of realization myself that the people that those years ago, I was struggling to have some level of relatability to people. And I think, podcasts are a great thing. And actually, I found myself connecting with people that I really feel understand the adversity and how much struggle it takes to start a business
Yeah.
and to get it successful and then to go through those milestones of growing it. And it's really hard. But there's, a world out there and we are connected. But, I have my own views on social media. I could go off on a complete tangent.
Yeah.
My views on social media are we're in a connected, well, more connected than ever. But actually, I think we're so disconnected in a lot of ways. And, I don't use social media because I just don't think it's, I use LinkedIn and I'm a big, big, big LinkedIn fan, but I just don't think it's great for people's mental health, and it's not something that I really want to be involved in. But I do think it's great, to have those connections and make sure that you're, finding people that you relate to.
Yeah.
Tell me, so the podcast you host, the Mosaic Life podcast, a very nice name, I like it.
Well, thank you.
But and it's all about people who are demanding the best for themselves and the lives that they want, and they're on a mission to do better each day is what it's all about. So tell us what you've learned since doing this podcast, because you've probably heard a lot of stories with very similar threads and people who've really been through similar experiences. Tell us a bit about the podcast and your experiences.
Yeah. The first word that pops in my head when talking about the podcast is the people with whom I get to speak. They're unapologetically themselves. And I think that's really important because if you're going to do something that nobody else has done before, or nobody that or nobody in your family has done before, you can't apologize about it. You have to be willing to make yourself uncomfortable for a time being so you can find comfort in the future. I know I generally say it's a podcast about happiness and discovering what it means to us as individuals and why so many of us who are chasing it never find it. And of course, without fail, the next question is, well, what is happiness? And I'm not trying to do this so I can define happiness, because it is very abstract. It really, really is. And, the people I've spoken with have all sorts of definitions of it. I'm doing this because I want to find the goal, I guess, is to find an algorithm for happiness. If you, no matter what place you are in your life, there is a way, there's a path for you to find that happiness, the things that bring you genuine joy and contentment and put you on a path to just riding that happiness wave for as long as possible. And so when I talk with these people, like you said, I demand for myself to do better all of the time. If I feel like I'm slacking, I need to do better. If I'm at the top of, whatever project I'm working on, how can I do it just a little bit better? Because I know you really need to be in command of your own motivation, your own ambition, and your own emotions to be able to find yourself in that state of happiness. And it's been very interesting to me talking with these people to get a firm understanding of what it is they do day in and day out that allows them to, experience that.
You mentioned an algorithm. Do you think that you're any way further forward with finding a particular formula to find happiness?
All the time I say, I'm a sample size of one. I do intend to actually, I would love to talk with more psychologists about the actual chemistry that makes up, our serotonin receptors and all of that. That is over my head at this point in time. But for me, the sample being one, I know that when I have an anxious or a negative thought, I'm giving myself permission to have that thought. But in order for it to not be toxic for me, I need to remove any judgment from it. I need to say, hey, I'm anxious about this project that I'm working on. Why is that? Does it warrant anxiety right now? Does it need to be done 10 minutes ago? Oftentimes, the answers to those questions are no. I do my best to be positive. When it comes to my outward appearance, I want to be positive because I want
You want
people
to
to,
project that.
yes, I want to project that.
Mm.
And so that doesn't mean that I'm an extremely, optimistic, positive person. That's not the case at all. Internally, I'm having negative thoughts all the time, and that's part of the human condition. But if I'm
Yeah.
able to remove the stigma and the judgment from those, I'm able to observe them as, from a third person point of view and say, okay, here's this thought I'm having. Why am I having that thought? What can I do in the future to avoid having this thought? And it's just been a very interesting thought exercise for me, and I'm able to a lot of times prevent those from coming into my head in the first place.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think for myself, I'm very much like you. I project that positivity in everything I do in a business sense, and I very much try to echo that in my personal life. But I think we all get these unhelpful, and sometimes they can be helpful, but a lot of the time they can be unhelpful negative thoughts. And I think you make a really valid point, and I think it's about knowing when you get that unhelpful thought, what is the facts that support it, what are the facts against it, and then knowing what the more balanced alternative viewpoint and perspective is.
Yeah.
And I think that it's about going through that process, because in any one day you can get so, especially when you're running a company, there's so many things that you could allow to kind of consume you. And a lot of this goes back to kind of, by no means an expert on psychology and the brain, I proclaim that now. But I know it's about kind of the primitive brain, and the primitive brain is larger than the intellectual part of the brain.
Right.
And the primitive brain is that kind of fight or flight lion mode, and that kind of takes control, and it looks at everything that happens that's a negative thought as the saber-toothed tiger is coming to get you.
Right.
And I do. I know about that because I've been on my own journey in regards to this, and I've had therapy over the years to talk about different things, and it's important though. But I think that you make such a valid point about unhelpful thoughts, and I think it's about knowing how to deal with those unhelpful thoughts, knowing how to process them, and knowing which unhelpful thoughts to allow to maybe you give more thought to, and which ones to think, hold on a minute, buddy, I'm going to park that thought, I'm going to leave that there for now.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
one of the most important terms that I've learned over the last year is emotional intelligence. And
Oh,
that's,
you're exciting me already. I talk about this a lot. Carry on, Trey.
yeah, and
Sorry.
I will be the first to exclaim that I'm not an expert in the field, but understanding what it is outside of intellectual intelligence, it's so incredibly important. And if anybody is curious about it whatsoever, Google it, research it, learn about it, because if you can develop emotional intelligence, you will put yourself so far ahead of the rest of the pack. I can guarantee it. You are going to be in such a good place.
I agree. This podcast is about you, Trey, and I keep talking, but you're making so many absolutely valid points. And I think emotional intelligence is something that is actually a gift of mine, and I think it's something which I fine tuned over the years. And the amount of times you'll get someone who's so highly intellectual, but actually they lack
Right.
large amounts of emotional intelligence, and it's actually the emotional intelligence and the connecting with people and the finding those common threads and finding those connections which will drive you forward in your career.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think it's one of the main things that I ask people who interview for our company. I say, tell me what you know about emotional intelligence, because I work in sales, but it's such a valid point, and it's so relevant in life. What do you think is the main thing that you've learned from the podcast since you've been hosting it, kind of in a nutshell? Not to put you on the spot
Right. Not at
or
all.
anything,
No, I appreciate that.
because there's so much we could talk about, but it'd be interesting
Yeah.
just to know.
When I have the opportunity to talk with entrepreneurs like yourself, or authors, or thought leaders, or TEDx speakers, or stage speakers, or anybody, I see a difference between them and the person who I was 10 years ago. These people believe wholly with their whole selves in their mission. They believe in what they are talking about. They believe in what they've dedicated their lives to. And I can remember, I can remember very vividly, working for somebody else. And again, this is just me, but working for somebody else, I can't tell you a time that I bought into the mission of the company. I was doing what I was doing to make money. And if you can believe so incredibly much in a cause that is propelling your life forward, it is something you're dedicating your life to, you are going to be so fulfilled, whether or not you're making $20,000 a year or 20 million. It does not matter. If you believe in your mission, in your cause, in your work, you are going to set yourself up for happiness so much better than somebody else who is hustling and grinding for somebody else who doesn't really believe in that mission. It's so important to know that what you're doing is making a difference.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think with company mission statements, values, and this, that, and the other, I always think yes, it's important to have one,
Right.
but it's about the people there. And someone could give me a mission statement, but as soon as I've walked into an interview, really, that's kind of parked right in the back of my mind. And what
Right.
I'm really focusing on is what's before me and the people in front of me. A company they spend. I dread to imagine how much some big companies spend on getting these mission
Right.
statements. I think it's important to make sure people are on the same line. People do have those values. It's important, but what's really important is the people that work there. And I think a good recruitment strategy is really important. What's been the most challenging kind of moment for you then throughout your business career or life that's kind of had a big impact on, things and your thoughts and what you're doing now?
Yeah. I've had a lot of conversations about this, especially recently for some reason. What we didn't get into, prior to starting the business that I'm in now, I started a different company with the same, essentially the same service offerings. And I quickly took on two partners, and that was a lesson for me. We worked together for, I would say, roughly a year before things really just started to unravel. And I used to hold a lot of resentment against the two of them, and just feel like I was taken advantage of, or whatever you want to call it. I was the person who would place the blame elsewhere. And so for me, the challenge was just looking at this from a 50,000 level view, learning from that failure and knowing that failure is okay. It really is. If as long as you're taking what you've learned from that failure and utilizing that in your future endeavors, failure is part of the process. That is the scientific process. And it took me a long, long time to realize that I should not be ashamed of anything that happened in the past, as long as I'm able to move forward and create a better, not only a better company, but a better version of myself from the things that I experienced because of that.
Yeah, it's. I think it's not necessarily the failures you've had, but what you've done and how you've processed those, and what you've ultimately learned from them, and what you change moving forward. If I had a pound for every time I made a failure, wow, there'd be some wealth there for sure.
Right.
But I always say, yes, I might make a mistake, but I very rarely make the same one twice.
Yeah.
I've had some painful lessons to learn over my business career. What advice would you give to someone who's maybe new to business, or someone that's thinking, I want to start my own company, but boy, I don't know where to go. How do I do that? How do I make sure that I get clients and market myself? Working in marketing, I guess this is a great question for you, and being an ex-marketing director, it's a great question for you. But what advice would you give to people who are maybe starting out in the business world?
Yeah, I've got two pieces of advice.
Ah,
One, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to admit that you don't know something. There are people out there who specialize in every area of business that you want to start. For me, I was always my excuse, and this is what it was. My excuse for not starting a business was I don't know how to do business taxes. When I didn't realize, or I guess I didn't want to believe, that I could just hire somebody to do that for me, and that was a very big turning point for me. If you have questions, there's a community of people out there who are willing to help and want to help and get a lot of value and a lot of good positive vibes from helping others and newcomers into the business world out. My biggest piece of advice, this is the one thing that I cannot state enough, and this will make or break you as a business person, and will make or break you as a business. If you say you are going to do something, do it. Do not make
mm,
excuses. Do not say oh, I couldn't do this because somebody else said they were going to deliver something else and it didn't work. If you say you are going to do something, find a way to get it done. It might not, oh, you might sometimes miss a deadline, but get it done and make it right by your client. The best marketing tool you have is word of mouth referrals from other people you have worked with in the past. If you say you are going to do something, do it.
I 100% agree with you. I think that delivering, I think, do you know what? I think it really comes back to managing expectations.
Yeah,
And I think when I know, I think salespeople can be awful at this. It's saying, yes, we can do this, yes, we can do that,
right.
whatever it is necessary to get the contract through the door. But if you mismanage expectations, then you've failed massively and you've lost business. It's better to under promise and over deliver than over promise and under deliver. Then you're in a whole negative cycle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. So, really interesting conversation. I think you've made some really, really valid points. Obviously, if people want to listen to your podcast, the Mosaic Live podcast, where can they go? Is that on iTunes or?
It's everywhere. So if you want to go straight to the website, it's themosaiclifepodcast.com. If you search in any podcast player to make your life easier, just search for Trey Kauffman, TreyKauffman, and I'll pop up.
Right, and it sounds fascinating. I'm yet to listen to an episode, but I definitely, definitely will do. I think the whole ethos of it is great. And in regards to your marketing agency, I can absolutely vouch for you as someone who cares, is passionate, and will do. Well, you've said it yourself, Trey. You deliver every time. Where can people go to find out more about the website design business and the SEO and the marketing work that you do if they want to find out more?
Absolutely. So my company is called 2237 Designs, and the URL is simply 2237designs.com.
Okay, and just to mention, I think you're offering 3 months of website maintenance with a fourth month free. So
Yes,
you heard it there. If you are interested, then you can go there. Trey, thank you so much. It's been lovely to talk to you. I think you make some really valid points, and I think it's been really fascinating to hear about your spiritual awakening, how you've kind of got to where you are. I wish you all the best. I'm Jason Connolly. This is the Career Success Podcast. That was Trey Kauffman, and until next time, goodbye.